Alright, what's up YouTube gang? It's your boy FridayRandomMedia. I'm back with another video, 2023. We keeping it rolling. So today we're actually starting a new video series on my channel. Unique from my usual content, but it only expands on what topics I like to learn about, read about, talk about. So today we are going over the werewolves of medieval fantasy. I'll go over werewolves and werewolf-like creatures from 5 different medieval fantasy verses. Now, for each universe, we'll go over their particular wolf beast, the background, the history of it, along with its traits, symptoms, its powers, abilities, all that good shit. After that, I'll go ahead and do a little breakdown of who I think would win in a battle between all 5. Because shit like that is just fun. I'll also tell you which one is my personal favorite and give you my reasoning for that. But without further ado, I'm going to drop a spoiler warning because we will be getting into werewolves from different shows, books, games. So, you're warned now. As always, thank you for tuning in. Let's get into it. Let's turn up. So, the first werewolf we're going to be going over is the Werewolves of the Elder Scrolls. This is lore from the games, fan favorite games Skyrim, Oblivion, Morrowind, and so on. The history and origins of lycanthropy in the Elder Scrolls is rather clear thanks to the ever-expanding community that surrounds Elder Scrolls and its lore. Lycanthropy is referred to as Hircine's gift by some and Hircine's curse by others. Hircine is god of the hunt, pretty wild dude. He was said to be meddling with wolves at the dawn of Nirn. And if you don't know what Nirn is, it's basically just the world in which the Elder Scrolls verse takes place. The wolves gained transformative powers, apparently, but it's more widely accepted that Hircine handpicked the first few lycanthropes himself, thus naming it Hircine's gift, thus hoping that those who he picked would want to pass on their gift, or their disease of lycanthropy. So, how is lycanthropy spread in the Elder Scrolls? And it's spread a few different ways, actually. Anyone can obtain lycanthropy if their parents were werewolves, if they were bitten by a werewolf, if they drank the blood of a werewolf, or, as I stated before, if Hircine actually picked them himself. So, werewolves in the Elder Scrolls somewhat remind me of what I believe classic werewolves to be. So, in their human form, the person infected will have strange growths of hair across their bodies in strange places. And they'll also frequently have very vivid nightmares, so vivid that it's actually difficult to distinguish from reality. That gives me that classic old school werewolf vibe that we all know. In beast form, it's common for werewolves to be in bloodlusted states, and if they're not actually fed recently, if they haven't fed, they're more likely to be in a feral state, which is more dangerous, more unpredictable. You just don't want to be caught up in that. In beast form, the werewolf has increased size, strength, stamina, you name it. Peak athleticism across the board. So, not only do they have that, plus a vicious bite, but the Elder Scrolls werewolves are also armed with magically enchanted claws for special opponents. So, I assume that would be vampires, because the werewolf-vampire, it's a rivalry across almost all different kind of fantasy worlds. Most werewolves transform at night and usually can't control themselves in beast form. But of course, there's some inconsistencies in the Elder Scrolls when it comes to this kind of thing. I don't think the full moon matters much whatsoever, considering the Elder Scrolls world has 2 moons. So I think it's just nighttime usually. If you're looking to cure or kill a werewolf in the Elder Scrolls, it's reported that herbs like wolfsbane and belladonna can poison, even kill a werewolf. Other forms of purging the disease of lycanthropy, like rituals and potions, are heavily guarded and oftentimes forgotten to time. They just, they disappear from existence because it's so well kept a secret. One of the best ways to fight a werewolf is silver weaponry, and that's another classic werewolf similarity that I can think of here. So, your best bet, if you're not the Dragonborn, is just to stay out of their way, really. An interesting thing about the Elder Scrolls werewolves is that all races of Tamriel are vulnerable to lycanthropy, and this includes orcs, Argonians, who are essentially reptilian people, and even Khajiit, who are like cat people. So I'm going to talk about Vicosa, a specific Khajiit werewolf named Vicosa. Sorry if I'm not saying the name right, but I'm gonna roll with it. So Vicosa was a Khajiit infected with lycanthropy, but unlike the vast majority of werewolves in the world of the Elder Scrolls, Vicosa was actually handpicked by Hircine himself. Vicosa was not pleased with Hircine about this curse, so she took it personally. She decided to use her new power and plot revenge on the god of the hunt. To me, that's kind of a bad choice. I don't know. I don't know if I would roll with that. Vicosa was a powerful werewolf that would call and command other werewolves and direwolves to her pack. Through her cruelty and ambition for revenge, Vicosa was able to create an assortment of werewolf behemoths, kind of like, offshoots of the werewolf, but the behemoths were especially powerful and large. Vicosa was preparing to take over Tamriel, the world of Nirn, and then the realm of Hircine himself. Until her Moon Hunter pack was then slain in her own den by a group of looters known as the Undaunted. Now, the thing about the Undaunted is that they weren't just your usual looters. These dudes would straight up loot realms. They've been to several realms trying to get a bag. So, in my opinion, this is kind of a shitty way to go down for Vicosa, especially with such huge plans. But that's going to be it for the Elder Scrolls universe werewolves. Now, moving on to our second werewolf, the Wolver, the God of War verse, the God of War video games. The Wolver first appeared in 2018's God of War game, and much like most other creatures and beasts in the God of War series, the Wolver is an actual thing of mythology, although of course it's not 100% accurate, which never bothers me really. The Wolver is originally found in Celtic mythology, found on the Shetland Islands of Scotland. Now, in God of War, the God of War verse, the Wolver appears in Jotunheim, which is in Norse mythology. So Jotunheim is like where the ice giants would be. Very cold, very shitty. Wolvers are not your typical werewolves. We don't really have an official history or backstory on them. They never appear in any sort of human or civilized form. The Wolvers don't transform or shapeshift. Rather, they're always standing or crouching on two back humanoid legs, sometimes using their front legs. These guys are tall, hulking, they got big, scary werewolf heads. Really a fucking sight to see. In Celtic mythology, Wolvers are usually peaceful when left alone, but in the God of War verse, the Wolver is an absolute unit and proves to be a challenging foe time after time. It's difficult to catch one on its own, and as if one isn't dangerous enough, if there's more, you're most likely screwed. Wolvers are extremely fast, big, agile, strong, aggressive, durable, and unpredictable, but that's really not even the worst of it. When the Wolver is damaged in battle, it can enter a berserker rage that I assume is following the Norse mythology theme with, berserker rage, berserker Vikings, whatnot. So in this berserker state, the Wolver becomes even more savage. It actually grows these weird protrusions or some sort of weird protrusion from the claw or the arm that deals even more ridiculous amounts of damage. It kind of almost makes me think of like a Venom symbiote, but it's not. If you can kill a Wolver fast enough, it won't actually get the chance to enter its berserker state, which you better cross your fingers and pray you can kill this thing quick enough. So, in God of War, there's two notable variations of the Wolver. The first being the normal, usual Wolver that will usually stalk its prey or its victim or its opponent. It's more notably agile than the second variation, which is the Fierce Wolver. And the Fierce Wolver is more tanky than the OG. It deals more significant damage, but really, neither of these beasts are anything that a mere mortal could wish to defeat. The Wolver goes toe-to-toe with Kratos on a regular basis, who kills gods like it's a Tuesday and he's out ordering tacos. So, you know the vibes. That's going to wrap it up for the Wolver of the God of War universe. Now, moving on to our third werewolf, coming straight up from Middle-earth, the works of J.R.R. Tolkien, author of Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, The Silmarillion, many more. Now, most people, and a lot of Tolkien fans actually, might find it surprising, but yeah, werewolves do exist in the Tolkienverse. Now, werewolves of the Tolkienverse were created by a Dark Lord, not Sauron, but Melkor, who was later renamed Morgoth. So, Melkor and Morgoth are the same person if I used their different names. Melkor, Morgoth. The brand had to get darker, bruh. So, werewolves of Middle-earth were Morgoth's first experiments with evil wolf-like creatures, and later down the line coming up with the warg, as we all see in Lord of the Rings. Now, the warg in the Ring of Power, don't get me started, man. The werewolves were created to serve Sauron, the Dark Lord we've all come to know. Sauron being the villain of the Lord of the Rings. Now, quoted by the Grey Annals in the War of the Jewels, creatures that walked in wolf-like shapes, entering Beleriand as early as 1330. So, sounds like evil werewolves to me. Sounds like they've been around for a long time to me. Not exactly humanoid, yet not any bit of the natural world. The werewolves of Middle-earth are abnormally large. They're depicted as shaggy and always a feral, dark gloom following them. Sometimes they're depicted as near hulking beasts. Absolutely horrifying to look at in some of the artwork. These evil wolf creatures were used in battle, but were similar caliber as like a troll or, more than a warg, but similar to like a troll. Possessing increased strength, speed, most physical attributes, but their link to Sauron and Morgoth, the Dark Lords, is where their power is drawn from. Because of their special creation and the link between their evil, these werewolves communicate directly to Sauron. And that leads us to Karkaroth, the strongest, most powerful werewolf created by Morgoth. And this was kind of just a flex by Morgoth. He was like, yo, fuck it, we need to give our boy an amp right here. So Karkaroth was made for that purpose. Karkaroth was son of the first werewolf, Dragluin, sorry if I butchered the name, Dragluin. But as I said before, Karkaroth was built different. By himself, Karkaroth guarded the gates of Angband. So, he wasn't anyone to really, tussle with. During a fight, Karkaroth bit the hand off of someone holding the Silmaril, basically an ultra-powerful spiritual jewel. And the Silmaril drove Karkaroth mad, burning his stomach. And Karkaroth basically became a top menace of Middle-earth. Orcs, elves, anyone in his way was getting mauled. So, to put it in perspective, just how savage Karkaroth was when he was amped by the Silmaril in his stomach. Here's an instance. Another super dog creature in Middle-earth was Huan, the Hound of Valinor. Now, Huan was basically like Dog Gandalf, but not really. But anyways, Huan the Hound went toe-to-toe with Sauron, as Sauron himself transformed to a werewolf shape. And truth be told, Huan beat Sauron and had him running. He spanked Sauron in wolf form. Now, this same Huan the Hound was killed in battle by Karkaroth, while Karkaroth was basically getting jumped in the process, and he actually ended up dying due to his wounds. So, this great werewolf beast, Karkaroth, swallowed a Silmaril. I guess you could compare it to like an infinity stone in a way, and just started mauling Middle-earth. It did not matter who it was. He ended up killing the guy who sent Sauron running, and that is just such a badass legacy to go out on. So yeah, that's going to wrap it up for the werewolves of Middle-earth, the Tolkienverse. So with that being said, let's move on to our fourth werewolf, the werewolves of the Witcher universe. Now, The Witcher is kind of a touchy subject for fans right now due to the Henry Cavill situation, but that's something that DC fans can relate to, so I won't press that too much. Lycanthropes first appeared in the world of The Witcher, simply named the Continent, after a multiversal event that took place. And the name of this event was called the Conjunction of Spheres. Now, the Conjunction of Spheres brought all sorts of magic, both good and evil, along with tons of different creatures, races, natural occurrences into the world of the continent. Werewolves are said to have roamed Tonia Valley, or as it used to be called, the lands of Dogbane. The source of lycanthropy appears to be a witch's curse. A witch's curse is one of the worst ways to spread or catch lycanthropy. There's a host of reasons why you've been cursed, along with trying to figure out who directly casted the curse. And if you're trying to get rid of lycanthropy, this tends to be a fucking hassle. Another way to catch or spread lycanthropy is if you're born from infected parents, which arguably isn't as bad in some instances, but it still sucks ass. The last and most rare way to spread or catch lycanthropy is through a werewolf bite, and that's if you manage to survive the attack in the first place. The infected individual will most likely experience nightmares, loss of time, unsure what they've done the night before, and nightmares. Now, I say that with caution because it does seem like there's some inconsistencies when I go over everything in the Witcherverse. But in beast form, the hulking werewolves still seem to have the ability to speak and show complex thoughts and emotions, but that does not make them any less dangerous. Werewolves of the Witcherverse are like others, being that they have enhanced strength, speed, size, agility, durability, and stamina. The werewolves' leaping attack will catch almost everyone off guard, and their regenerative abilities make them a huge pain in the ass. And the way you can kind of counteract the regeneration is if you cover your sword in oil, if you use fire, if you use poison. Now, even if you're skilled, even if you're as gifted as Geralt himself, the werewolf's health regeneration and its stamina makes up for whatever skill it lacks. If it gets caught up in a tough battle, werewolves can howl and call in reinforcements, so it's very important to kill it as fast as possible. Now, I'm going to share a tale about a particular werewolf. Ultimately, a pretty rough, pretty shitty story for this guy. His name is Morkvarg, and he was a pirate that unfortunately fucked around and found out the hard way. Morkvarg decided to defile the Garden of Freya. Morkvarg was gathering up the priestesses of the garden and subjecting them to horrible, terrible acts. And as this one priestess was being carried away, she spat a curse in Morkvarg's face, who was then cursed to lycanthropy. And this was no usual case of lycanthropy, though. Morkvarg had an unquenchable hunger, and once he finally was able to eat food, he finally had food to eat, as soon as it hit his tongue, it would turn to ash. Now, imagine that on top of being cursed to immortality, to reanimate in the Garden of Eden, the Garden of Freya upon your death. Now, it's said that although the priestess spat the curse at Morkvarg, it was actually his own crewmate who was disgusted with Morkvarg's acts. And that is just one of the coldest burns I've ever heard. One of the coldest backstabs I've ever seen. Oh, what a complete downfall for this dude. But in my opinion, well deserved. Now moving on to our fifth and final werewolf of the medieval fantasies. It wouldn't be a medieval fantasy discussion without Game of Thrones, A Song of Ice and Fire. However, I'm going to warn you that this isn't going to be werewolves. This is going to be the famous direwolf. And many fans will recognize the direwolf as the sigil of House Stark and a staple in the Stark family story. Direwolves are similar to wolves, but much larger, about the size of a small horse. Direwolves are highly intelligent, highly loyal, very strong animals. And there's a reason I wanted these guys on the list, because they're not really like other wolf creatures in fantasy as like today's standards. A non-human civilization somewhere near the dawn of time in the Game of Thrones verse, named the Children of the Moon, would call upon direwolves for help. So direwolves have been around for a very long time, since the beginning, it sounds like. At the time of Game of Thrones, direwolves haven't been sighted south of the Wall in over 200 years. Now, direwolves are they're nearly mythical creatures, yet their existence is known and somewhat acknowledged. It's also rumored that north of the wall, direwolves occupy a region in huge numbers, bigger than anywhere else in the Song of Ice and Fireverse. So if you don't know what the wall is, in Game of Thrones, the wall is a big deal. Of course, I recommend checking out the show. But yeah, the wall is about a 900-foot tall wall of ice that stretches for like 300 miles. It separates kingdoms of Westeros from the wild of the north. This wall has been built and protected for over 8,000 years. So it sounds like the direwolves have been around for a long ass time, if they predate the wall. So as I was saying before, direwolves are bigger, stronger, faster, but they're still only animals. They can still be slain. So a very popular and notable direwolf would have to be Jon Snow's direwolf Ghost. And I'm kind of going off the show, I think, for the most part here, but a pretty fitting name, as Ghost would fight on for Jon's friends when Jon himself was killed. Eventually, Jon Snow does come back, so him and Ghost are reunited and they live out their tales. Another instance here for the direwolf. Sansa Stark. Her direwolf, Lady, was not so lucky. I'm going to probably screw this name up, but Nymeria, I cannot remember how to say it. Nymeria was a direwolf of Arya Stark. So Arya and Sansa are sisters. In defense of Arya, Nymeria bit someone on the hand. However, this someone was a little blonde dickweed named Joffrey, son of the king, heir to the throne. So, before being executed, Nymeria managed to escape. But in Nymeria's place, Lady, the direwolf, was executed. And very sad. So clearly, as you can see, although the direwolf isn't a werewolf, it isn't a usual common wolf either. They're still incredibly valid, and I felt compelled to include them on my list here. So that is going to conclude the 5 werewolves of medieval fantasy. However, we're not done yet, because this next little segment, I'm going to break down which wolf beast creature will win in a battle. And if you like versus battles, things of that nature, check out season 1 of my versus battle series. It's a playlist on my channel. But let's move on to this one. If we had all 5 of these things thrown in a room, who is coming out on top? And the answer is honestly pretty tricky. For sure, I believe the Game of Thrones direwolf is the first to get put down. The direwolf is no slouch, but it simply can't compete. It gets one-shotted by damn near everyone else on this list. So, the direwolf is out. The next werewolf I see falling victim is the werewolf of the Witcherverse. Now, as much as the regeneration will help, it's not going to help enough against the amount of damage and the types of damage that these other werewolves are going to be putting out. So, the werewolf of the Witcherverse is out. Up next on the chopping block is a big controversial take for many reasons. The Elder Scrolls verse werewolves. Now, the power scaling of the Elder Scrolls verse is nutty. And it's honestly just ridiculous, so I'm going to go against the grain here. In my opinion, the werewolves of the Elder Scrolls verse are too inconsistent across the board to really be a definitive top player here. Due to the magically enhanced claws, the Elder Scrolls werewolves will be able to put up a fight and put some foes down, but it's going to fall in 3rd place here on the list. The Elder Scrolls verse werewolves are out. So we're down to our final 2 werewolves. The werewolf of the Tolkien verse and the God of War verse. And this one killed me in making my choice, but I think the Wolver of the God of War verse would come out as the winner. And here's why. The werewolves of the Tolkien verse were great and powerful, but they were not close to touching Karkaroth, who was the top dog, the cream of the crop as far as werewolves go in the Tolkien verse. If it's Karkaroth in this battle, especially with the Silmaril in his stomach, the Silmaril amp, Karkaroth bodies everyone on the list. However, considering the Wolver's power and danger against someone as insanely powerful as Kratos, I'm taking the Wolver as my pick. Now, finally, what werewolf is my favorite of this bunch? And it's a pretty tough decision, but I did manage to make a pick. So, although not my favorite, the werewolves of the Witcherverse was an interesting search, and they were interesting to research. The Witcherverse is something I need to immerse myself in more, and it seems really cool. I need to check out the games. I really just need to read more of the lore. Very interesting verse I want to dive more into. All werewolves on the list were awesome to look into, but my personal favorite has to be the werewolves of the Elder Scrolls. Not only are the werewolves interesting in their many stories and unique characters and whatnot, the numerous factions, but the thing that really strikes me is the spirituality and the context of the werewolves as far as religion goes in the Elder Scrolls. The god of the hunt, Hircine, who plays the key factor in the creation of these beasts, is definitely an interesting character, and we didn't even really get a chance to expand on the afterlife of the werewolves, and that's something I can make an entirely other video about if it's requested, because that's an entirely different thing on its own. So, in conclusion, those are 5 different types of werewolf, wolf-like creatures from 5 different medieval fantasy verses. I broke them all down, told you what they were about. I decided the Wolver of the God of War verse would win in a battle. I also declared the Werewolves of the Elder Scrolls verse as my favorite on the list. If I missed any werewolves, if I missed any medieval fantasy verses, shout them out in the comments. Also, comment down below what you guys want to see next from me. More versus battles, as Season 2 is going to be on its way soon. Any what-if scenarios and what universes you want to see that from. Any reaction and breakdown videos. Anything at all. Comment down below. Make sure to hit the subscribe button. As always, find me on TikTok as well. And thank you for tuning in. Have a good day, y'all.